Hi, Tony DeWitt here, Missouri appellate attorney and a guy who likes to make the law make sense on YouTube. Today we're starting a new series. I'm going to call it Lawyers Behaving Badly, and I think you'll see why here in a minute in our introductory episode. It's a doozy, let me tell you. Let's talk about it down at the beach. As I may have mentioned earlier in some of my other videos, one of the things that I do is I do a continuing legal education seminar every year for the Samaritan Center in Jefferson City for their legal care program. And in doing that, what I do is I evaluate the worst of the worst law cases or legal discipline cases, and I put those on and I try to do it in kind of a funny and irreverent way so that people can laugh a little, because I believe if you can laugh, you can learn. And as a result of that, that's how I came across this particular story and why I wanted to bring it to your attention. Several years ago, I guess it's probably been more than 30 years ago now, there was a great little movie that came out called Young Doctors in Love. And it was a comedy and it had all kinds of different sight gags in it. It was a terrific movie, but every time I think about things that have gone wrong, I always think about that movie, because Young Doctors in Love can be moved over into things like Young Lawyers in Love, and that's sort of what we have to start off with here. So Jill and Kent, the lawyers involved in this case, the lawyers who were behaving badly, they were they met in law school, they got married, they had a child, a daughter, and they, like most parents in Orange County, sent their children to public school there in Orange County. But as you probably are aware, there are all kinds of problems in California as far as their budget goes. They don't have a lot of money to pay extra teachers or extra help. And as a result of that, many of the programs, including the programs where children are set up to be picked up after school, are run by PTA volunteers. And that's where we meet Kelly. Kelly is just your typical soccer mom, a nice gal who volunteers her time at the school, not only to help her daughter who goes there, but also to help the other children and the other parents. She is one of those people who pays it forward. So Jill and Kent apparently have a very high opinion of themselves, and that, as you would expect from any parent, they have a pretty high opinion of their child as well. I'm sure that if you think about it, you can probably think of someone in your life who, if there is a way to take a comment negatively, takes the comment that way, even though it's clearly not intended that way. You know, one of those people that you say, wow, it's a nice day outside. Oh, so you want me to go outside so I can get out of your hair? Well, you know, one of those people. Anyway, Jill and Kent are pretty happy with school, no problems with it, until one day when Jill goes to school and goes to pick up her daughter and asks this volunteer where her daughter is. And she said, I don't know, she's pretty slow to line up. And instead of taking that as, temporally slow, meaning not getting there very quickly, she interpreted that as a slight against the child's intelligence. And boy, were they ever hot. They complained to the school. They tried to get her fired. They tried to take her out of the PTA. I mean, they did everything that they could to enact vengeance against someone for a comment that wasn't even meant in a negative way. You know where this is going, right? There are some people who have never learned that revenge is a dish best served cold. And they've also never learned that, the best revenge is living well, right? Well, Jill and Kent were mad, and they turned out to be master criminals. Yes, the kind of master criminals who routinely the police catch up with sooner or later. You know, a lot of times people spend hours and hours thinking of, nasty schemes to get back at somebody and just not realizing that, all of that is just eating at them, and, they're never, those people are living rent free in their head. And you don't want to do that, obviously, if you're a normal, well adjusted individual. Apparently, at least in my opinion, these two don't seem to be normal or well adjusted. Their secret plan is to plant drugs in her car. Now, to do that, they get some Vicodin and some Percocet, and I believe they had some marijuana too. I'm not certain about the marijuana, but I know the Vicodin and Percocet were in there. And with this Vicodin and Percocet, they put it in a plastic bag. It's a funny thing about how your hands work. When you touch something, you leave touch DNA. So if someone were to come and bag my mouse today, they could get DNA off of the top of it here. Let me get it over here. They could get DNA off of the top of it because that's where my hand rests when I use the mouse. And as a result of that, that's one of the ways that a lot of times pieces of evidence are tied back to the defendant. Most lawyers know that. Most lawyers know that even if they're not criminal lawyers. Now, Kent, as it turns out, was not a criminal lawyer. Well, maybe he was a criminal lawyer, but he was not engaged in the practice of defending criminals. He worked in a securities litigation. And as a result of that, he probably did not know how powerful DNA is in tracing things back. To make a long story short, these folks got together and they decided they would plant this in the car. And the way they did it was they waited until the dead of night, and then Kent got into his car, drove over to where they knew this Kelly person lived, and waited. And when the lights go out, he waits about an hour or so till he's pretty sure these folks are asleep. And he calls Jill on the phone. Hey, Jill, I'm getting ready to go in. And I'm sure she's like, hey, yeah, that's great. The next thing that happens is he goes over, opens the car door, puts the drugs in, closes the car door, and goes home. Now, what do we know about cell phones? We know that they bounce off of cell towers, and that cell towers can often be used to triangulate position and tell you in a general way where someone is. In this particular case, it put him pretty close to Kelly's address. And because police were later able to get telephone records, they found the call at about 3 o'clock in the morning from Kent to Jill. Kent goes home, and the very next day, he calls the police, calls 911.
Irvine Police.
Yes, hi. I was calling because my daughter's a student at Plaza Vista Elementary School, and I'm concerned one of the parent volunteers there may be under the influence or using drugs. I just had to go over to the school, and I saw a car driving very erratically, and as it continued on into the parking lot of the school, and I was going there, and I just had to look to see who it was and what was going on, and then I saw them get out, and it looked like they had something away in their car, and behind their seat with some drugs, and
what did they?
All over the place, and then they went into the school. And I recognized the woman as the parent volunteers for the after school program, and I'm concerned that there are drugs at the school.
So you specifically saw her place something behind her seat?
Yeah, it looked like she had some like pills or something.
Okay, what is your name?
My name is Jay.
Jay?
DJ.
And what's your last name?
Chandrasekhar.
How do you spell that?
CHANDRASEKHR.
The Irvine police go and they find the PT Cruiser and they pull the lady over and they walk up and they say, "I need your keys." She said, "Okay, here you go." They search her car and they find the drugs in it. I mean, she's devastated. She hits the ground on her knees and explains to the police officer, that's not mine. I don't know where that came from, but it's not mine. And of course, every cop who has ever done any police work knows that when you go and you find a baggie of drugs in somebody's car, that's the first thing they say. "Well, that's not mine. Somebody must have thrown that in there. I bet you planted that evidence, didn't you, Deputy Dog?" You see that all the time. And the cop had seen it all the time. But he took her in and he told people, she denies this, and she denied it pretty convincingly. So they hooked her up with a detective and they get around to sort of backtracking through what's happened recently in her life. Does anybody have any grudges against her, I guess? And somebody puts two and two together and they figure out that, somebody planted this stuff on her. So the first thing they do is they go and they look up the 911 call and they listen to the 911 call. And they trace it back to the place where it was made, from a payphone in a hotel lobby. And the hotel is located right across the street from the law office where Kent works. And by the way, Jill hadn't been practicing law since 2005 at the time of this event, which occurred back in 2011. So she wasn't currently practicing law, even though she had a California bar license. But Kent was actively practicing law, and he walked across the street and made the phone call. So the police go over there to the hotel and they pull the security video. And guess who is on the security video? Yes, our master criminals here. Kent is there on the video, plain as day. So they go confront him. He lies, and eventually they arrest him and charge him with a felony of planting evidence and possession of narcotics and that sort of thing. And he swears he didn't do it, but of course DNA comes back and says, "Well, your wife's DNA is on the pills and your DNA is on the bag. It's pretty clear who put these pills there." And oh, did we mention the fact that this lady, Kelly, her DNA is nowhere on this thing? So it didn't look real good, and as a result, both Jill and Kent were convicted. Both were disbarred, or I suppose because Kent didn't just take the rap for Jill, the marriage broke up too. And as a result, they got divorced, and he is obligated to pay $8,000 a month in child support and $4,000 a month in alimony, and he can't practice law. Well, that's not a good situation for him to be in. And that's what his situation is, or at least was at the last report. After all this, Kelly decides that just sending him to the jail is not going to be good enough. And as a result, she sued them for intentional infliction of emotional distress, and she recovered $5.7 million in a jury verdict. Kent was able to cobble together some money and reach a settlement with Kelly and her family, and he got out of the case, but his former wife, now known as Ava Everhart, she wasn't able to do that, and she continued to appeal it right up to the point that it went to the District Court of Appeals, where she dropped the appeal because she probably didn't want her new name, her pen name, by the way, she writes romance novels. She probably didn't want that pen name associated with a published opinion that demonstrated her complete ineptitude at criminal activity. As far as I know, Kent, as we sit here today, is working as a legal consultant. Now, I'm not sure how that works in California, how you can work as a legal consultant instead of as a lawyer, but for whatever reason, he is working as a legal consultant and he's not practicing law. Jill, however, or Ava as she's now known, has moved to Havana, Cuba, and is apparently in a relationship there. That is the crazy story of two lawyers who were behaving very, very badly. And you have to wonder about the poor child that was sort of at the center of this storm and what will become of that child. If the child was in grade school at 2011, which is the time that this was going on, she would be probably an adult today, and she would probably have the um, stigma of being associated with these two. And so I feel pretty sorry for her in that regard. Now, everybody winds up loving their mom and dad, and that's normal. And certainly, I'm certain that they loved their child. They just took a very bad approach to dealing with their anxieties and their anger over how their child was supposedly treated. It's one of the reasons why, when I've written articles before for different journals about anger, and anger management classes are a good thing to take for just about anybody, because the thing that most often causes tragedies, whether it's a car accident or anything else, is anger. Several years ago, I lost a fairly important trial. I had worked 9 years on a case, and I finally was able to get it to trial. And I had, without a doubt, the dumbest jury in the state of Missouri. And they voted for the defendant. Um, and I was really, really angry about that. And I got up angry. I went to bed angry. I was probably miserable to live with. And what it took for me to get over that anger at that jury was to get angry at myself because I rear-ended somebody, because I was just, the part of my mind that should have been paying attention to my driving was caught up in worrying about that other thing. And it taught me a very valuable lesson. In fact, many of the lessons that I've learned in life have come at the expense of my pocketbook, and certainly that one did. Um, it's important to keep your feelings under control. I used to say, oh, that son of a gun, I just hate them. I don't do that anymore because hate is a useless emotion. As someone once described it, hatred is like taking poison and expecting the other person to die. And so I try very hard to work out things, take a few deep breaths, step back, think about it, try to find a better way to react to things that make me irritated or angry. And I don't always succeed. I mean, I'm human just like everybody else, but I try a lot harder now than I did in the past. So I offer that for whatever value it may be. So that's the story of our lawyers behaving badly. It's the first in a series. If you like this content, if you like this particular kind of story about lawyers who do bad things, then the thing that I would ask you to do is comment and let me know that, because it would help me. I've got a lot of material to go through. As I mentioned previously, I do a continuing legal education seminar every year for the Samaritan Center, and I used to call it the 5 dumbest, 7 dumbest, 12 dumbest lawyers in America, depending on how many I had found that year. But because lawyers are prickly people and they often have the ability to sue people even after they are disbarred, I try very hard not to irritate people too much so that I don't get sued. So in these 12 dumbest lawyers in America, I would talk about all these cases. And as a result, I have a really vast repository of really dumb lawyer stories. And I think I can make some pretty good content in that regard. And if you like this kind of thing, I would appreciate you letting me know so that I can make that content. And if you don't, go ahead, break my heart, render all that stuff useless. It's okay. I'll adapt. Anyway, thank you again for being here. Thank you for watching. I hope you found this interesting, educational, useful. If you would, please like and subscribe. You know, all those things we ask you to do here on YouTube. I'm certainly not alone in doing that. And if you can, try and do something nice for somebody today. Have a marvelous day, and I'll catch you on here next time. If you like this video, here are a few others you might try, and don't forget to subscribe. Have a terrific day, guys.